And I'd have to imagine, and I'm curious, like, are you seeing then that the people that are doing the work are they more like in terms of profitability? You may or may not know this, but like, is it because they're more focused on a higher value output, or is it because they are more well-rounded in their skills and you could be more diverse in the way that you utilize them across the business? Which of those levers you think is it pulling for you?
I think it's both. I think the first one, situationally, the first one, I mean, if you know more, you can do more in HubSpot. So you're in those meetings with, people that we're working with on a regular basis, and you say like, oh, you know what? I saw this data point in here, and I think we can change this, and I want to do this and this inside HubSpot, and this will help grow your sales leads by like 10%. I mean, who's going to say no to that, right? So I think that's the blocking and tackling component of it. And certainly from a speaking to people, that may be in a position to work with a group like ours, it carries weight across so many different, from the marketing side to the sales side to, the HubSpot side, to be fair, right? I mean, when they are looking at maybe a partner to recommend to one of their customers or whatever, I think the fact that, we have this individual knowledge that rolls up into team knowledge goes a long way, right? I think that's an important element of it. You can't shortcut that. You can't. The thing I love about the learning part of it and what Kevin is getting, you can't cheat that system. You either go through the classes, meet the requirements, take this, and yes, you can technically you can, but you're not, you really can't cheat that learning process and developing that knowledge base. So that's why I think it's valuable, right?
Yeah, it's cool. It's a good call out to think about knowledge is power, right? That kind of age old expression, but also in terms of your position in any ecosystem as any partner, the depth, right? Whether that be number of players on the bench. So for some folks, it's just let me just hire more people. Yeah. Sounds like for you, it was I've got good people. Let me build more knowledge into their skill set so they can deliver more value to the customer, which helps us to differentiate both in terms of our ability to do the work. And then obviously the subsequent work results that we're delivering to the end customer that, impacts the entire ecosystem as a whole.
100%. Yes. Cool. And we do have amazing people, super fantastic people.
Smart.
And it's I think, when I started this thing, I was trying to build something that I would want to work at, right? And I think that what you end up with, where at least at this point, is a bunch of people that are like you, that understand and value and appreciate those same things, and they want to work with you, So, that works out pretty good.
So I want to switch gears here, because you're talking about the mistakes, if you will, the opportunities, the learning chances you've had over the last couple of years towards this next stage of growth. So when I think about growing in any ecosystem, there's a bunch of different levers there. I've said that kind of twice here today, but there are different motions you can take in order to execute on that growth, whether that is, acquisition, right? A lot of M&A talk happens in ecosystems, especially as they get bigger, or, differentiation. Is it, thinking about different services, or is it thinking about different verticals and industries? So how do you, what tools do you use, kind of ideology, what kind of framework are you using to think about how you can take Even Bound in the business to that next stage of differentiation, next stage of growth overall?
Yeah, I mentioned this earlier. We were talking about capacity and utilization, and a couple of years ago, I guess it was, that we really started to track that really robustly. Not punitively. If you're not tracking utilization right now, don't make that a punitive thing, because that's not going to work. That'll kill your culture. But just tracking it from an understanding standpoint. About that same point in time, we were really trying to pour into data, and we implemented EOS. And so we run on EOS.
I love EOS, John. I love EOS.
It's a great framework, right? And what it does for people like me, who may be a little prone to ADD and bouncing around a lot and all that stuff, is it allows me to compartmentalize pieces of my business and put them over into buckets where is delegated over to that person, and oh, that's not my role. I shouldn't be doing that. I need to get out of that and give that to this person because they're great at it, right?
Yeah, so I think the line of demarcation, right? That separation you're describing in terms of responsibility, but also ability, skill set, and ability to focus and or really tackle the problem. That's great.
Yeah. And that, I mean, there's like, there's in EOS of those 6 pillars, like the people portion of that is a big component of it that I think we've gotten really solid on this year specifically.
It's interesting. I actually haven't had many conversations, none on the show yet, around EOS. So it's cool that you brought it up. I'm glad that you did. When you think about EOS as a framework for how you're going to grow, is it the methodology itself that's done it, or to your self-description, is it just because it helps you focus? I'm really curious to hear your thoughts on that.
Like I said, it's the compartmentalization that I think is the most valuable. And it really, for better or worse, it forces me to stay in my lane, right? And really right now, my lane, and I know we're going to make some time to talk about this, my lane is looking forward. I need to be building towards, something bigger and better down the road, and not stuck in some of these things that I have been stuck in traditionally. And so it creates the ability to do that. But it's fascinating. I talked to other agency owners. They're similar in size to us and everything else. And like, I talked to somebody yesterday, and which just does such a great conversation, because you can arrive at pretty much a similar spot in very different ways. And he's running on EOS, and he is both the visionary and the integrator in one. And he has a business partner, and they both kind of balance some skills that way. And I just like, that would never work for us. Right. So like there's the people and the roles. It's amazing to me how rigid yet flexible EOS is, and how people can use that tool to both arrive at a similar point in time in terms of like growth and revenue and headcount and all that stuff. But in just different ways, Yeah.
And to your point, like when you talk about the level at which you're viewing the problem, and, you said obviously being more forward looking, and I want to get into that here in a second. Yeah. I can't help me. I think of this conversation I had this manager years ago when I used to lead a sales training team here, and her name was Kara Potter. Shout out to you, Kara, if you listen to this. Just an incredible leader, really, really smart human being. But one of the things she used to always say to me, she'd kind of blow by my desk, or she'd see me in the hallway, or, after a session, whatever. And she'd look me in the eye and she'd say, what are you viewing this from? How high are you flying right now? And I said, in the beginning, I didn't know what she meant. Yeah. But when we finally get into the details of it, she got really good at helping me think about, am I viewing this from 500 feet? Is this problem something that I need to be in the weeds for, really tactical, very focused, boots in the ground? Or do I need to elevate myself to 30,000 feet, look across the landscape and see the material impact over the next 3 years, 5 years, whatever that horizon is that we're looking at here? And when I think about what you're describing, this shift in the way that you go from working in the business to working on the business more, kind of getting away from the tactical day-to-day and much more visionary. Let's talk about that. I want to hear how you're thinking about this kind of next stage of evolution of growth of scale.
Yeah, I love that checkpoint of like, what's your elevation right now, right? Are you at 500 feet?
I still use it.
Dodging trees because you don't need to be down there. It's a great analogy. And I think, I think the important part about my role and what I'm doing is, I think, not necessarily like, let me start that over. I think it's important to, as a visionary, to know what your role is, but it's probably more important to know what your role is not, right? And so what I have set out on my day-to-day activities is, of course, going to involve some level of technical things that need to be addressed, or I need to be in a sales call, or whatever the case is, right? But more importantly, I also need to carve time in and around all that stuff to make sure that I am looking forward, that I am up at that 30,000 foot view, and trying to push the company or pull the company. It's like, are you pushing or pulling, right? I'm pulling the company forward towards that growth plan. And I think that's what I'm most aligned to. And that's really, to be honest with you, in the trajectory of this business, I've never been more passionate about it than I am right now. Right. In looking at the work that I have done in this role, and the future that we have, in spite of whatever this recession or not recession is, I'm super confident, and I'm super passionate about where we're going and what we're doing. So it seems to be working out okay for us.